Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to my YouTube channel Master That English, where we understand, analyze and interpret important texts that are part of your English curriculum. Today's topic takes us back to the Victorian age, where our poet helps us navigate the vulnerable emotional states of the human mind through his famous stylistic technique, the dramatic monologue. The poem that we'll be analyzing today is Prospice by Robert Browning. Now, interestingly, the word precipice comes from the Latin meaning to look forward. But here's the question: what does it really mean to look forward when life puts you through unexpected adversity? This poem explores exactly that. It takes us deep into the psychological turmoil a human being experiences when faced with situations we are not prepared for. It is believed that Browning himself was going through an emotionally difficult phase after the loss of his wife, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who was also a renowned poet. And what makes this poem truly beautiful is how it represents personal growth through contrast. I like to connect this idea with the symbol of yin and yang, where light and darkness coexist in equal measure. But Browning does not do this in the notion of yin first. In fact, he begins with the darker side first. The yang in his life is the absence of his beloved, the emotional void, the loss, the pain. And through this darkness, he builds a journey towards strength and acceptance. Now, the poem opens with a striking rhetorical question: fear death? Because let's be honest, death is inevitable. But Browning is not interested in death itself. He is interested in the journey towards it. And according to him, this journey is not smooth. It begins by affecting the most vital parts of our existence: the throat and the face. He uses powerful imagery like fog in the throat and mist on the face. And now think about this: fog in the throat can symbolically represent a loss of voice, a moment where words fail, where expression itself becomes difficult. Similarly, the face represents identity, how we present ourselves to the world. And when there is a mist on the face, it suggests a kind of blurred identity, a feeling of losing control over who we are, especially when we lose something or someone deeply important in our lives. So, through these images, Browning is not just talking about death, he is talking about what it feels like to go through emotional suffering. And this is where the poem becomes incredibly relatable. Because at some point in our life, we all experience moments where things feel unclear, where we feel lost, and where we feel like we are no longer in control. And that's exactly where Browning wants us to begin the journey. What's interesting now is the way in which this emotional turmoil starts having an impact on the physical self as well, which is where Browning deliberately personifies the elements of nature as we proceed. We notice how the poet has deliberately tried to explain the new surrounding as a harsh surrounding, where every element of nature doesn't seem calm and reserved in its form. The external environment reflects an internal struggle. Nature has been represented in several different forms which are not calm. For example, night has power, storm presses us down, death has become a foe or an enemy. And the poem looks like a battlefield where the poet stands on one side of the terrain and the nature in the negative energy is trying to dominate over him, making him feel weak and timid. There is a kind of imposed struggle that the poet is feeling here. But what is interesting along the line is the philosophical note he brings in the moment he ends with this negative vibe around him, which is he calls himself a heroic warrior. He says this philosophical line where you have to go on and you have to proceed in life without thinking about where exactly your life is about to end. This is the resistance that he is bringing about in the poem, that the strong must move forward. We cannot lose ourselves on the way. The speaker wants to accept the pain, the darkness, the cold, and the isolation. He does not want to escape this just because he has seen people suffering around him. And this course of journey, he wants to be a witness, an experience holder to all of it without having a sense of fear about it. That shows the courage that he holds within himself. And these ideas do not just apply to his personal agony, it can also be correlated with the phase with which the society was developing during his time, where industrialization had also caused a level of havoc in the lives of people who were not really able to sustain and work on their own resources. There was a class divide where the rich were able to do everything because they were self reliant on their own resources and they did not have to depend on anyone. But the lower classes were not capable enough to think of a life where they could sustain in a positive environment where agriculture was now replaced by industries. The workers had to go through harsh conditions. And when you see the poem from a different angle, you do realize that the fog, the mist, could also symbolize the lifestyle with which the lower classes were also leading, the suffocation and stress that this particular age was bringing about in their life. There was a level of fear many experienced, mainly because industrial age had also brought in a level of migration for people from this particular region. They were going to different unknown territories where fear was a recurrent thing that anybody could feel in a natural form because nobody knew if their journey would be safe. Nobody knew whether everything would be turning out as favorable as they wish it to turn out as. But even then, in spite of all these fears, where you know that your life may not take a smooth course, there is always a if. But even then, what Browning suggests in this poem is no matter what be your situation, whether it is a personal loss, whether it is your personal situation in terms of economic crisis, you just have to lead on. You cannot think of losing yourself behind and thinking of a way in which nothing is ever going to work out for you. You can't surrender to difficulties. Even today, in the 21st century that we live in, we all feel the same sense of failure towards things that we aim and aspire for. There is always a struggle first and victory later. We all are experiencing an identity crisis where everybody is heading to a rat race where we sometimes just imitate people because we are in the mindset where we just want to achieve something. Things such as technology is replacing the very worth of individuals. AI has taken over in a better way than what we could have ever imagined. It is doing the manual tasks that once took hours and hours for us to complete. Where are we going from all this? Is this the death of mankind in terms of doing chores that was once providing us a mental relief or was acting as a stress buster because there was nothing expected from us on the level of stress which is usually caused when there is a lot of uh, mind exertion. All the manual work, if it goes away, our mind is constantly bothered and mystified with the notion of how we are going to evolve, how we are going to stand out from the rest of the people. In many ways, this poem relates to every age, whether it was the age when it was written or whether it was the age where we are reading it today. And the whole idea behind this is that you cannot overlook struggle. You have to move on in life because down the line, You will come across the beloved who is probably your person in the other world if you're going through an ailment, probably the thing that you were desiring that could lead and come to the very location that you were expecting it to be. So life is beautiful if you think of it in this manner. And I think this poem is more about evolution than anything else. And I hope through this small poem, Browning has definitely allowed us a level of reflection where we want to evolve as human beings, not based on the notion of just stagnation or surrendering to the notion of whatever is dominant, but on the idea of keep going on until and unless you don't feel that it is not fulfilled as per your desire. If the desire had stem, the work will also proceed sooner or later. But don't be afraid of the uncertainty. Uncertainty will always be there in every phase. But what is important is your spirit, which needs to be kindled again and again, sometimes with philosophy of the notion that if the strong can do, so can I. And that is what is going to make a change, as it did in the Victorian age as well, when all these difficulties that the common man was experiencing led to a revolutionized change with new reforms that was able to shape the way in which people wanted to lead their life with comfort. And there was a kind of respect that was given to the common man, understanding that this is not acceptable to the society. I also feel the manner in which Browning represents the vulnerability of individuals also highlights the way in which the mental agonies of the time were also being in the focus. And also, most of the people were just giving philosophies relating to life. Browning was actually talking about a very common situation of mental health that had to be given sympathy and emotional comfort to a certain level because science did not evolve in the way of understanding how it affects the brain, human brain, when stress is too much. And there were very interesting incidents that happened at the time, which I think probably would be a cause of concern for many people to understand the side of the person which is not in line with the social requirements that people often expect us to behave in a normative manner. But I think sometimes it is important to show your vulnerable side too, because that helps you to grow, that helps you to overcome things that have been creeping in your mind. And this style of writing, that is the dramatic monologue, which was often noticed in the plays of Shakespeare, where the main lead would often speak in this style, has definitely given a new dimension to the way in which Browning wanted his listener or reader to feel the intensity with which a poet who goes through agony can heal all wounds, regardless of the situation that they are in. There is a connect we all can establish with this poem, which is what makes it beautiful. And with that, I conclude our analysis for today. This was short, easy, and crisp, and I hope you enjoyed it through the way in which we correlated it based on the poet's perspective, the society's perspective, and also in the 21st century's perspective with which I am taking a look at it. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. See you soon. Until then, take care.